Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Tacoma Cyclist. This is a much requested video because I've come out in the past and said how much I just hate erg mode and why I don't think people should be using it. And I'm not alone in this. There are a lot of coaches out there that don't believe that erg mode should be used for their workouts. And I'm going to talk you through it. So today, instead of giving 5 reasons to use it and 5 reasons to not use it, I'm going to say here are 5 reasons to not use erg mode and 5 reasons why you shouldn't be using erg mode or should turn it off. So kind of negative, but understand training is training and it's all valuable, but let's talk about why we want to take off erg mode. Now, the first and most important thing that if you've ever used erg mode, you've experienced this, the death spiral. So what I'm showing you here is a clip of a workout that I've built for myself, which is intentionally somewhat cruel. You do these ramp ups to pretty high power and you get very little rest between them. The whole purpose of this is to build anaerobic capacity. But something else that happens when you do this type of workout is that there's the high likelihood of potential of failure. So when you can't quite hold the power that it's asking you to hold, you're going to hit that death spiral. And if you've never experienced the death spiral, let me explain what this is. As I'm doing this interval here, the first one out of 6, it's not that hard. I can do a pretty good cadence. I can keep the power pretty stable without erg mode in place. I can stay within the zone that allows me to look like it allows me to stay within the proper zone. If I weren't able to, however, what would happen is my cadence would begin to slow down. And as that cadence slows down, the amount of power, the amount of force that I have to put through the pedals to keep that power appropriate is now significantly higher. So what that means is as my cadence slows down, the amount of force I have to put through my legs and to turn the pedals over is much higher. That's the death spiral, because the more that happens, the more it forces you to slow your cadence down, which means more power or force is required. Force is a function of power, is a function of force. More force is required, and it's a snowball effect. The more you slow your cadence down, the more it pushes back. The more it pushes back, it forces you to slow your cadence down. And before you know it, you can't even turn the pedals over. You literally can stand on top of them, and you can't even turn the pedals over. The death spiral is probably one of the single worst things about erg mode. And if you've ever done erg mode, again, you've experienced the death spiral. Now, that leads me to my second point, which is directly related to the death spiral, which is you can't fail gracefully when using erg mode. And not all workouts, you shouldn't always get all the stars in all your workouts. If you're doing that, that means that you're probably not challenging yourself in a way that you should be. Now, if you look here, I just failed that interval. I failed it miserably, right? That's not a bad thing, though. I want to be able to compare this to maybe how I did this interval in April, right? I want to look at this workout and say, am I feeling more fit than I did in April or May, the last time I did this workout? How long was I able to sustain these bursts? How quickly was I able to get up to these bursts? But if that erg mode is constantly locking your trainer into that specific power, you don't have the ability to go back and look at that data. You instead just get to see either that it's working or it's not working. It's a very binary thing. So when you fail, you immediately go into the death spiral and you're done. There is value in seeing how you fail, and that's very important. Erg does not allow you to see that information. Now I'm going to stay on this interval set for this next one, which is that it is not realistic. Erg is not realistic. I cannot imagine a scenario where I would be riding along at 135 watts and essentially feel a brick wall where I need to do 465 watts to maintain the same cadence, and maintain the same cadence. That would be like going from a 0% incline to an 18% incline with no time to transition. That's called a wall. They don't really exist in reality. So, if part of your training is to simulate what you're capable of doing on the road, well, then erg fails that too. And something that I'm frequently saying to the Boogeyman, as well as to any athletes that I work with, is You practice how you race how you practice. And if you're practicing hitting some 18% wall that doesn't exist in reality, you're never going to encounter that in a race. Essentially, you're working on something that is of little to no value to your actual race skills as they translate to the real road. So it's very common that you find that you need to shift gears rapidly and put out more power, and there's a ramp up to that process, or that you have the opportunity to shift gears down and go to an easier amount of power. That's what having erg turned off allows you to do. When it's turned on, you hit that brick wall. Even if it's a gradual ramp, which most of them will ramp over 2 to 3 seconds, you still have that inertia draining, momentum draining effect of the flywheel of your trainer just starting to lock down, and that alters how your legs interact physically with the bike in a way that is not physiologically the same as when you're on the actual road. Which, surprise, surprise, leads me into my next topic, which is that those big jumps that we're talking about here, they're too much. They're not the same. So again, when you go from 135 watts to 460 watts or 465 watts, that has a specific feeling associated with it on the road. That's not the feeling you get with erg. And in fact, if you wanted to do that on the real road, you're going to find that you do something very specific with your legs. Chances are you are doing some sort of shifting and cadence adjustment, especially if you want to jump to that, right? And I can think of an example, like if you're attempting to chase a breakaway or even trying to form a breakaway yourself, maybe you're going to go from a moderate power to a pretty high power. You're not going to simply do that where you just feel the resistance gradually get more or even abruptly get more. You're going to ramp up that cadence to an incredibly high number. You're going to shift a couple gears, and you're going to react. And again, you train how you race how you train. So why would you do it in a way that does not represent what is reality? Okay, so now onto the second part of the video, which is where I tell you what are the benefits of not having erg turned on. So in other words, why you should consider doing this on your own, okay? So one of the things that erg, in my opinion, strongly forces or enforces within a rider is the ability to be lazy. And by turning erg mode off, you're forced to pay attention. And what I mean by that is actually pretty simple here. And in fact, I just got caught not paying attention on that little workout right there. When you are working out without erg mode turned on, you have to be looking at your power numbers. You have to be looking at your heart rate. You have to be looking at your cadence. You have to be looking at all of these things. When you have erg mode on, you just simply have to spin. And if the bike is telling you to go harder, then you go harder. And if it's telling you to go easier, you go easier. Most people keep their cadence pretty similar, unless, of course, their coach is telling them to do a certain power at a certain number. But let's face it, a lot of you aren't using coaches. You're just simply spinning at whatever makes sense. So forcing yourself to actually pay attention is great practice for a race. One of the reasons that if I fail at a race, it's oftentimes because I lose concentration or if I've lost track of what I'm trying to do. Again, I'm going to come back to this over and over again. You practice how you race, and you race how you practice. You train how you race, race how you train. If you're not paying attention in your training, you're not going to pay attention when you get to a race. There's something to be said for doing an 80-minute, 90-minute workout and actually having to pay attention for the vast majority of it. Now, when I point out for the vast majority of it, there are sections within workouts that I don't think you really have to focus that much on. And I kind of get aggravated by the little star ranking system from Zwift. I get why they put it there. You want to feel that sense of accomplishment. But these segments that are in the middle here, if you look down on this workout on the left, you see there's a couple gray segments, 2 minutes at 135, 2 minutes at 135, repetitive. Those are rest sections. If you want to check your Facebook feed, you got 2 minutes to do it, right? This is the time where if you want to check out mentally for a second, you can. And you're going to miss the star, probably. But that's okay. And again, that goes back to what we talked about in the reasons why I don't like having erg turned on, and that is because if you are encountering the death spiral because you're sitting there just chilling for a second, well, that's not gonna help you. So turning erg mode off, of course, forces you to pay attention for the majority of your workout. That's just not a bad thing to do. Now, somewhat related to that is your ability and even need to use cadence. Now, maybe this one's a little controversial because technically, yes, within erg mode, you can in fact use your cadence to vary your power. That's totally fine. If you spin faster, the amount of resistance feels less. If you spin slower, the amount of resistance feels greater. But again, I come back to the fact that most people are kind of mentally checking out when they're on their erg mode. They don't have to focus on that stuff. So instead, what they do is they settle into what feels almost like a natural cadence to them. Sure, there's benefits to that, but there's also drawbacks to that as well. And one of the things I'm going to point out here in this next segment is that these intervals that I'm doing don't vary a great amount. 200 watts, 225 watts, 200 watts, 225 watts. The whole purpose of those intervals is not to see if I can do a 25 watt difference. That would be ridiculous. The purpose of them is to see just how much control do I have over my ability to manipulate my power output using cadence only. In this particular case, 225 watts and the gearing that I've selected is roughly 94 RPM. 200 watts is between 89 and 90 RPM. That's a subtle difference, but it is a difference and it's one worth noting. And the key here is we want to go for consistency. You want to see that these lines that are across the bottom here, if you look across the bottom of the screen that shows you my power profile, you want to see those be as flat as possible. Now, if you're using erg mode, they're going to be flat, especially if you have a trainer that uses erg smoothing. They're going to be pan flat. But are you really being pan flat, or are you having little micro adjustments in between? And I'm going to tell you, that's what it is. If you've got erg smoothing on, it's going to make it look like you've done the most perfect interval in the world. But I promise you, you hook up a secondary power meter to that, you're going to find out it's just not true. So your system's lying to you. Consistency, the ability to use cadence to adjust, and to be able to fine-tune your power output with your cadence is very, very important. Now, this next one is really kind of related to something I had said before, and that is that without erg mode on, this is going to be far more realistic. It emulates the real world more realistically. If you have the opportunity to do interval training in the outside world, which, that's how everybody used to do it, right? You go out and you try to do specific intervals. But let's face it, with the advent of some of the technologies that we have nowadays, people now have access to power meters that didn't before. They used to train on heart rate or speed, which doesn't work. But having the advent of the power meter means I can take this exact same interval, load it into my cycling computer, and head out to the road. And when I'm shifting my gears on the road, I can emulate this, especially if I find a good open path, a good open area where the gradient change isn't too dramatic on a regular basis, which, all right, I'm in the Northwest. Everywhere I go, there's mountains. But regardless, if I take this out on the road and find a flat spot, I can do this exact same workout on the road as I am doing on the trainer. Obviously, my bike does not have erg mode when I'm out on the actual road. So if I want to emulate real world training, I'm going to come back to it again. You train how you race how you train. This is what I want to do. I want to try to make it feel as though I'm actually on the road as much as humanly possible. So turning off erg mode enables that capability and that feeling. My final 2 points of reasoning as to why I think you should turn off erg mode are actually really closely related, but I am going to talk about them separately. Turning off erg mode does give us access to a lot more data. And what I mean by that is actually really simple here. It's very easy for me to look at my data in the past and say, oh, I did those intervals perfectly because my trainer said I did, right? But if I'm looking at this data that I see on the screen right now, like the same data you're looking at on this YouTube video, the same data that I'm looking at, I can see a couple things that are actually really, really critical to me here. Number one, how consistent was I, right? How smooth is my graph? how long did it take me to settle into the new power? You know, if it's a power that's higher, did it take me longer to get up to it? Did it take me shorter to get up to it? How quickly did I settle into that power? Did it look like I was drifting off towards the end? Was my cadence suffering towards the end? Was my cadence doing well towards the end? All of this information is incredibly valuable. All of it is thrown away if you're using erg mode, because you're basically just seeing the power started here, the power ended here. You had to do a certain cadence anyway. And then really the only cross comparison, the only intersection of data that you have is your heart rate. So if I did 2 erg workouts 6 months apart, there's really only 2 things I can look at. Either A, did I pass fail? Like, did I pass the first one and fail the second one, or did I fail the first one and pass the second one? And B, was my heart rate higher or lower for the same amount of work? Whereas if I'm looking at this, and let's say I'm comparing data sets just across over maybe 1 or 2 weeks, right? Because if I'm comparing this across just 1 or 2 weeks worth of work, there shouldn't be a massive amount of variability. My heart rate should be relatively the same unless I was experiencing some stress, which for this particular workout, I will tell you I was under a lot of personal stress. So my heart rate values are significantly higher than they would normally be. I didn't get as much rest as I want. But again, that's all valuable information. But looking at my power values here, looking at how smooth or not smooth those intervals are, tell me a great deal of information. Looking at it and seeing how quickly my heart rate settled in, and again, how quickly my legs settled in, all of that is valuable information that is thrown away when you have the computer do the work for you. Because again, it just looks like a smooth block. And that's the data that's transmitted to your Training Peaks or to your Strava. And if you're trying to compare that, if you really, really, really want to see how well you're doing, it's not just about your power output and potentially your heart rate. It really is about how quickly you are able to settle into what you're doing. How well you are able to keep your cadence and your power output smooth relative to each other or even independently. All of that information is key, and that is only accessible to you if you do not have the computer do the work for you. Yes, again, you can compare that intersectionality of power versus heart rate, but there are so many things that can influence your heart rate. Poor diet, good diet. Poor sleep, good sleep. Stress at work will impact your heart rate. So just using that cross comparison with your power data is potentially useless. But seeing, if I were to go back and compare this exercise, I'll use this as an example. In fact, I did this exact same workout just 2 weeks ago, and I failed this workout miserably. I wasn't feeling well. I was very tired. I was feeling a little bit better, but not dramatically this time around. You can see my heart rate is relatively high for this type of effort right here. But even though my heart rate's high for this, my intervals are pretty flat overall. They're very consistent. There's a little bit of up and down here, and a lot of times if the up and down, by the way, is not at the beginning, like right as you get into the effort, it's probably because I was sitting up, standing up, whatever, to adjust my position on the trainer, free up the giblets a little bit. But otherwise, I can take this exact same workout and I can compare it to the one 2 weeks ago and say, well, where in that workout did I begin to fail? Where did I start to falter? Was it right at the very beginning with those opener intervals, those 5 red intervals that are just for openers? They're just to get me warmed up. So did I start to fail there? Notice here, at this particular point in time, my interval is actually low. I'm below the power. That's valuable information for me to have. And again, I just simply would not have that information if I were in erg mode, because it would force me to be at 200 watts. Right now, I'm being quote-unquote successful, but I'm hovering closer to 185 watts. What does that tell me? With my heart rate being as high as it is, my power being as low as it is, what does that tell me? That is valuable information. If you're working with a coach and they don't want to see that information, you might want to work with a different coach. If you're working by yourself and you're just trying to do workouts, that's the type of data you want to compare. You want to be able to use that to determine whether or not you are improving or whether you're slipping, overtraining, whatever. You can't just use 2 workouts. You maybe have to compare 4 or 5 over the course of 6 weeks or 8 weeks. But that's really, really valuable information that you can use as a comparison tool. Okay, so that is my take as to why I believe that erg mode is a tool of the devil. Where do I think erg mode is used appropriately? You know, if you're doing a ramp up and a ramp down into your workout, sure, use it there. That's the only place I feel like it's appropriate. Beyond that, I don't think it really is. I think there's just too much data to be had by not using erg mode. You don't have the ability to compare yourself across multiple weeks. And really, honestly, the sign of success, the sign of strength is consistency to me. And when you're using erg mode, you're always consistent, at least according to the computer. You're always consistent, but that's not the truth. So when you're doing your workout without erg mode and you're all over the map, you know, you're swinging 20 watts in either direction, that tells you that maybe you're operating outside of your comfort zone. Maybe you're trying to push more power than you should be. Reality is, you want to be seeing these numbers where they only vary by a couple watts in any given direction, and you want them to be smooth. Smooth is powerful. Smooth is fast. Smooth is a sign that you're operating within your capabilities. And if you begin to go past that, that's when you start to experience that roughness in your graph and your performance, and all of that information is here. But if you turn on your erg mode, it's not there. So there's my rant. Erg mode's terrible. I get the concept. I get why people like it. I do not. I welcome your feedback down below. You know, put something in the comments and let me know why it is that erg mode is the most amazing thing since sliced bread. Have a happy debate down there. I may chime in, but you know, you've got my opinion on this. That's my opinion as an athlete. That's my opinion as a coach, and it's just that's it. So I hope this video was helpful. If you have any questions about some tips or tricks on how to wean yourself off of erg mode, I'm happy to help with that. First and foremost, get ready to fail workouts. You know, those stupid little stars on the left? Just get ready to fail some of those. And that's okay. But nonetheless, I'm here. It's a support group. We got you back. Boogeyman and I just don't use erg mode, so we can talk you through the whole thing. You know, we've done this for a while. So yeah, that's it for the video today. Thanks for your patience. I know a lot of you have been wanting this video for a while. I hope it lives up to the hype and the expectation. And if it didn't, then I'm sorry. But you know, here we go. It is what it is. Other than that, thanks again for stopping by. We're going to have some more content coming up real soon, including some more product reviews. I know people like those. And some more race breakdowns. And I'm even going to start talking about cheating in Zwift on some of my videos. So stay tuned for that, because that's always a lovely controversial topic. In the meantime, give us a thumbs up if you like this. If you didn't like it, and you're hearing me speak right now, that means you watched the whole darn thing anyway. I think you secretly liked it and you just don't want to admit it. So just go ahead and smash that thumbs up button too. Otherwise, if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. We want to get to 1 billion subscribers. We're just a little bit short of that right now, so hit that subscribe button. And share this with your friends and tell them why it is that they shouldn't be using erg mode like a sucker. All right, thanks for stopping by, and we will catch you again real soon.